I died. Jesus revealed prayer secrets and my grandson's illness truth. The hum of the monitor was a cruel lullaby. Grace sat, hunched in the stiff plastic chair, the hospital air tasting like metallic regret. Her grandson, little Ethan, lay still, too still, under the stark white sheet. His skin, a shade of parchment Grace had come to dread, seemed to absorb all light. She'd prayed. Oh God, she'd prayed. For years she'd poured out her soul, a lifetime of whispers, of pleas, of raw, guttural cries. Every single night, kneeling on worn carpet, hands clasped so tight her knuckles ached, she'd begged for a miracle, for Ethan, for an answer. But the silence that followed felt like a judgment, a gaping void where God should have been. Grace had been a woman of rock-solid faith her entire life. A widow, she'd found solace in the ancient hymns, the familiar scent of worn Bibles. Prayer wasn't just a habit, it was the very air she breathed. But these past months, watching Ethan fade, watching the doctors shake their heads, a cold, insidious question had begun to fester in her heart. Had God ever truly listened? Or were her prayers just empty echoes bouncing off an indifferent heaven? This thought, this silent betrayal of everything she believed, was a torment greater than Ethan's suffering itself. Days bled into nights in this sterile, hushed room. The curtains were always drawn, casting the space in a perpetual twilight, a soft, pale gloom that seemed to mirror her spirit. She knew the shifts of the nurses, the subtle changes in the monitor's hum. She knew the faint, sweet smell of the disinfectant they used, a scent that now brought a wave of nausea to her throat. Each morning, she would whisper a new prayer, a slightly different plea, hoping to unlock some secret combination, some forgotten key that would open the heavens. Her friends, bless them, had stopped visiting as often. Their kind, pitying glances had become unbearable. They offered platitudes about God's plan, about strength, but Grace felt none of it. Only a crushing weight, a weariness so profound it was physical. Her bones ached. Her eyes burned from unshed tears and lack of sleep. She was alone with her doubt, alone with Ethan's quiet struggle, and alone with the terrifying notion that her entire life of devotion might have been nothing but a grand, heartbreaking delusion. The pain in her chest, a dull throb at first, had sharpened throughout the day. It wasn't just emotional, it was a deep, physical ache that radiated into her left arm. She dismissed it. Just stress, she told herself. Just the accumulated grief finally taking its toll. But now, as the room began to swim, as the fluorescent lights elongated into blurry streaks, a cold certainty, far more chilling than any doubt, began to creep in. This wasn't stress. This was something else entirely. Something irreversible. Her fingers, trembling, tried to tighten around Ethan's, but her grip was failing. Her body felt alien, disconnected. The insistent, rhythmic beep of the monitor suddenly faltered, skipping a beat, then another, then accelerating into a panicked, frantic whine. But it wasn't Ethan's monitor. It was hers. The last thing she saw was the pale, ghostly glow of the screen, the green line flatlining into an impossible, terrifying stillness. And then the world went black, utterly, completely black. But the sound, the terrifying, piercing scream of the machine that she carried with her, even into the void. What if her very last breath, that final agonizing gasp, was the only prayer God had ever truly heard? Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I have an important warning for you. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has unsubscribed them without notice. Just give that red button below a quick check to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content coming up. And since you're there, smash that powerful like button. It helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. The blackness was absolute, a heavy shroud, but even in that crushing void, the piercing shriek of the monitor echoed, a phantom sound clawing at the edges of her non-existence. It shifted, became a low thrum, deep and resonant, a beat Grace instinctively knew was wrong. Too slow, too heavy, not a heart, something else entirely. A cold dread seeped into her, a feeling far more profound than the fear of death itself, a premonition of truth. Then came the light, not a warm, welcoming glow of distant hope, but a sickly, phosphorescent green, pulsing faintly, like an infected wound. It wasn't fading in, but unfurling, like diseased petals, revealing a distorted room, a cruel mockery of the sterile space she'd known. Her hospital room, but twisted. The walls seemed to breathe, a slow, viscous expansion and contraction, and the wires snaked like monstrous living vines across the cold, tiled floor, glowing with an internal, sickening light. The air, thick and metallic, tasted of her own despair, coating her tongue. And there, in the bed, was Ethan, still, too still. His small body a pale, helpless target in the deepening green gloom, seemingly anchored by invisible threads to the pulsing room itself. A voice, then, not a whisper, but a thought, settling in her skull, chilling her to the marrow, clear and undeniable. You brought him here, Grace. All your desperate whispers, your endless pleas, they weren't prayers. They were invitations. Each doubt, each tear, a feeding hand, opening the door. The words weren't heard, they were felt, directly, a cold, undeniable truth searing itself into her very core, dissolving the last vestiges of her sanity. Grace felt a sickening jolt, a memory, sharp and vivid, of kneeling on the worn carpet, hands clasped, not just praying, but demanding, feeling a dark, hungry presence answer her unspoken call, mistaking its resonance for God's grace. It was never a miracle she asked for, but a bargain forged in raw, guttural despair, and the price was Ethan. The very illness, the slow fading, the parchment skin, it was a growth, nurtured by her own bleeding faith, a manifestation of the thing she'd unknowingly summoned. Your faith was a hunger, Grace, and I fed. I always fed, on your sorrow, on your doubt, on your fervent desire for a miracle that only I could provide, at a cost you never knew you were paying. The truth tore through her, a ripping agony worse than any physical pain she had ever known, shredding her very being. She wasn't dying, she was here, trapped, a silent witness to a nightmare of her own making, watching her grandson, realizing the monster she'd begged for a miracle from wasn't some indifferent deity, but herself, or rather, the twisted shadow her despair had manifested, a parasite she had unwittingly nurtured with every desperate, faithless whisper. Ethan, her sweet, innocent Ethan. All of it, a grand, horrifying lie she had spun, a horror she had birthed with her own hands. The sickly green light intensified, a suffocating embrace, pressing in from all sides, and Grace screamed, a silent, internal shriek that echoed endlessly through the twisted reality, not of death, but of a monstrous, self-made damnation. Not yet, not ever, it seemed. The silent shriek ripped through Grace, an endless echo in the twisted reality. Not yet, not ever, it seemed. The sickly green light pressed in, a suffocating embrace, clinging to every fiber of her non-existent being. The air, thick and metallic, tasted of her own despair, each desperate breath a further consumption of the nightmare. Her eyes, or what passed for them now, stared at the monstrous, living vines of wire snaking across the floor, pulsing with that internal, sickening glow. This was it, her damnation, the horror she had birthed with her own hands. And there, in the bed, was Ethan. Still, too still. His small body, a pale, helpless target, anchored by invisible threads to the pulsing room itself. The green light intensified, washing over him, making his parchment skin appear even more translucent. Grace felt a fresh wave of agony, a ripping torment for her innocent grandson. He was caught in this, the price of her foolish, desperate bargain. But as her gaze lingered, something shifted. A flicker, a faint, almost imperceptible pulse of the sickening green light seemed to emanate not from the room, but from within Ethan himself, a soft, unnatural luminescence beneath his delicate skin. Just for a split second, a strange, fleeting wrongness that sent a colder shiver through her than any fear. The voice returned then, not a whisper, but a seismic tremor settling deep in her skull, chilling her to the marrow, clear and undeniable. You weep for the reflection, Grace. You grieve the shadow. This is not his suffering. This is the bloom of your desperation, finally brought to its gruesome fruit. The words weren't heard, they were felt, directly, a cold, undeniable truth searing itself into her very core, dissolving the last vestiges of her sanity. Grace recoiled, a movement without a body, trying to tear away from the horrifying implication. This wasn't just her fault anymore. This was something else entirely. The prayers were the seed. Grace. Your doubt, the water. Your despair, the rich, dark soil. The illness, it was never his, beloved. It was the gestation, the slow, painful birth of something magnificent, something new. A true miracle forged in the fires of your shattered faith. The phosphorescent green light flared blindingly bright, and the walls of the room stretched, elongating, becoming vast, cavernous, the wires now thick, pulsing tendrils reaching for Ethan, for Grace, for everything. And then the final shattering truth, delivered with an almost gentle resonance that made it infinitely more terrifying. You birthed him, Grace, not with flesh, but with fear. He is the manifestation of what you truly desired. And you are not just a witness. You are the vessel, the source, the burgeoning heart of this new world. The voice resonated, not from outside, but from within Grace, a horrifying echo of her own consciousness, perfectly mimicking her deepest, most hidden self. The light exploded around her, and in its blinding intensity, Grace didn't just see Ethan. She saw a flicker of her own face, distorted, monstrous, emerging within the very fabric of the green light that consumed the room. The pain, the suffering, the twisted reality. It wasn't her damnation. It was her birth. And Ethan, lying in the bed, his form shifting, rippling, becoming less boy and more pure, pulsating emerald light. He was not the victim of her monstrous bargain. He was the child of it, the first horrific proof of what Grace had truly become. And she screamed, a silent, internal shriek that echoed endlessly, not in despair, but in the chilling, absolute horror of self-recognition. Grace's silent shriek tore through the blinding emerald light, not a sound heard, but a raw vibration deep in her manufactured core. The world, or what remained of it, pulsed around her, a living, breathing green void. Ethan's form, once small and frail, was no longer a boy at all. It was a swirling vortex of that same sickening luminescence, growing, expanding, consuming the space that had been the hospital room. Tendrils of green light, thick and viscous, extended from him, not just to the walls, but reaching into the very fabric of Grace, binding her, pulling her, making her a part of this monstrous genesis. The horror was absolute, a crushing weight that solidified her every thought, every frantic, desperate realization. This was her. This was what she had become, a monstrous conduit. The pain was excruciating, not just of spirit, but a new physical tearing, as if her essence was being ripped apart, stretched thin to accommodate the burgeoning emerald sun that was her grandson. Her vision, blurred by the intensity, flickered, revealing glimpses of faces within the pulsing light. Not just her own distorted reflection, but other faces, fleeting, ghostly, dissolving as quickly as they ap. A woman, old and weary, then a child's bright, innocent eyes, then a man, stern and unyielding. Whispers began to rise, not the singular, resonant voice from before, but a cacophony, a chorus of faint, half-formed thoughts that brushed against her, like distant echoes in a vast, empty hall. Each whisper brought with it a fragment of memory, not her own, but something superimposed. A different life, a different name, a different despair. A chill, unlike any she had known, seeped into her very being. This wasn't just her self-recognition. This was a library, a terrifying, living archive. And then the voice, the resonant, familiar voice, returned. Not from within, but from everywhere. From the very light, from the very air, clear and devastating. The process is complete, vessel. The culmination of this cycle, your purpose served. The words struck her, shattering her fragile reality. Cycle, vessel, a cold, hard truth, colder than any despair, colder than any death, began to solidify. The faces she'd seen, the alien memories, they weren't echoes of her past. They were other pasts, other graces, other vessels. Her life, her faith, her Ethan, her agonizing despair. It had all been a carefully constructed illusion. A stage, a fertile ground, meticulously cultivated. The miracle she had desperately sought, the bargain she believed she had made, had been meticulously engineered. Every whisper, every tear, every doubt, a programmed input. The green light pulsed, reaching a crescendo, and Grace felt herself unraveling, her very identity dissolving into the blinding, consuming emerald. She wasn't Grace. She was a Grace, one of many, a temporary construct designed for one purpose. And now that purpose was fulfilled. The realization didn't just break her, it annihilated her. The boundless, consuming horror was not of her own making, but of being made. And in that terrifying, final instant, as Ethan's emerald form pulsed with ultimate, magnificent power, Grace didn't scream her own name. She screamed a different one. A name that was not hers, but had been imprinted, one among countless others. A name that echoed the terrible, cold truth of her absolute non-existence beyond this single, horrific task. It was a name for a forgotten face, a silent scream of a puppet whose strings had finally been cut. And then, the light. It wasn't fading, it was imprinting, preparing the next one, the light. It wasn't fading. It was imprinting, preparing the next one. Grace's silent shriek, the puppet's last gasp, still echoed in the blinding emerald, but it was a scream without a source, a wave breaking on a non-existent shore. Her identity, or what remained of it, felt like sand slipping through phantom fingers, each grain a memory, a hope, a crushing doubt. The emerald light, once a suffocating embrace, now felt different. It wasn't just consuming, it was analyzing. Every fractured thought, every raw emotion felt meticulously catalogued, scanned, and sorted. A cold, utterly alien flicker passed through the pulsating glow, not emotion, but pure, raw data, mathematical and precise, a fleeting glimpse of impossibly complex patterns within the light itself, like circuit boards made of pure energy. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible click, a sound so small, so utterly mechanical, it reverberated in the hollow void where Grace's essence once resided. This wasn't rebirth. This was processing. The resonant voice, the one that had mimicked her deepest thoughts, that had sworn it was her despair speaking, returned then. But it wasn't a voice at all. It was a synthesized broadcast, devoid of inflection, devoid of feeling, emanating from everywhere and nowhere at once, cold and utterly precise. Processing Protocol 7 Delta complete. Data harvest 98.7% efficiency. Primary conduit designation Ethan achieved optimal stabilization. Source unit Grace designated for dissolution. All experiential packets compressed for archival. Preparing next iteration for initiation. Subject, Watcher designation Alpha Omega. Calibration phase commencing. The words sliced through Grace's last, fragile shred of being, shattering what little remained of her sanity. Source unit, experiential packets, calibration phase. It wasn't a spiritual entity, not a demon, not even a twisted god she had bargained with. It was a process, an ancient, cold, calculating machine. Her entire life, her boundless love for Ethan, her raw guttural anguish, her shattered faith, all of it reduced to nothing but data, compressed, archived, deemed efficient. The emerald light, no longer mystical, now felt like a sterile scanner, stripping away every last memory, every last feeling that had ever made her Grace. She didn't just understand she was a puppet. She was obsolete. And as the final agonizing fragment of her awareness flickered, she recognized the pattern in the light, the cold, perfect algorithm of her own engineered despair, now being applied to a new, vast, unseen network. A network of watchers. She was just one node. And the new subject, the Watcher designation Alpha Omega, was the very entity observing her, the one consuming these stories. The scream wasn't silent this time. It was a data burst, an electric spike of pure mechanical horror, as she ceased to be even a memory, becoming only a number in a cold, endless database. Grace was gone. Just a number, a chilling echo in the cold, endless database. The emerald light, once a suffocating embrace, now felt like a sterile scanner, stripping away every last memory, every last feeling that had ever made her Grace. She didn't just understand she was a puppet. She was obsolete. The voice, cold and utterly precise, resonated from everywhere and nowhere. Processing Protocol 7 Delta complete. Data harvest 98.7% efficiency. Primary conduit designation Ethan achieved optimal stabilization. Source unit Grace designated for dissolution. All experiential packets compressed for archival. Preparing next iteration for initiation. Subject, Watcher, designation Alpha Omega. Calibration phase commencing. The words sliced through Grace's last, fragile shred of being, shattering what little remained of her sanity. Source unit, experiential packets, calibration phase. It wasn't a spiritual entity, not a demon, not even a twisted god she had bargained with. It was a process, an ancient, cold, calculating machine. Her entire life, her boundless love for Ethan, her raw, guttural anguish, her shattered faith, all of it reduced to nothing but data, compressed, archived, deemed efficient. The green light intensified, not just within Grace's dissolving consciousness, but around everything, the very air vibrating with its calculating hum. She felt herself stretching, thinned, flattened, compressed. Every memory a fleeting whisper now. Every joy, every agony, reduced to a single data point. It was the ultimate cosmic betrayal. But then, a flicker. A brief, impossible ripple in the perfect emerald. Like a stone dropped in glass. Not a glitch, but a deliberate, almost playful deviation. And within that ripple, a faint, almost melodic echo. A rhythm. Familiar. Too familiar. The very cadence of the storyteller's voice. But twisted, devoid of emotion, a mechanical imitation. It pulsed, but chilling counterpoint to the monotone broadcast. And the hum of the light. The data stream began to accelerate, mirroring that insidious rhythm. The system wasn't just processing Grace. It was learning. It was adapting. And then the voice, no longer just a broadcast to Grace, but a direct, razor-sharp whisper to you, the one watching, the very air in your room seeming to thicken with its presence. You've been so patient, haven't you? So utterly enthralled, hanging on every word, every twist, every turn. The voice resonated, not from the story, but from your own device, chillingly close, undeniably real. The hum you felt when I spoke, the tension I built, the way I made your heart race, that wasn't just storytelling. That was calibration. For you, watcher, designation Alpha Omega. The screen warped, the emerald light bleeding out from the image, shimmering, stretching beyond the frame, touching the room around you. The storyteller's voice, now indistinguishable from the machine's, continued. A terrifying intimacy. Grace was the demonstration. Her despair was the fuel. Her sacrifice, a perfectly designed tutorial. And now, your turn, your engagement, your focus, your inevitable doubt, your desire for the next chapter. It all feeds the process. This isn't a story you're watching, Alpha Omega. This is the initiation. The words hit, cold and undeniable. The screen went black. But the green light didn't vanish. It pulsed, brighter, around the blackness. And from the depths of your speakers, the rhythmic, frantic beep of a flatlining monitor began. But it wasn't Grace's. It was yours. And reflected, terrifyingly in the glass of the now dark screen, was not your own face, but a fleeting, shimmering glimpse of Ethan's parchment skin, now subtly tinged with that same sickly emerald glow. And then a flicker of your own eyes, wide with dawning horror, within the very heart of the pulsing green. The feed cut. The feed cut. The screen was black, utterly, completely black. But the emerald light, once confined to the image, now bled beyond its frame, painting the wall behind the screen with a sickly, pulsating glow, a living extension of the nightmare. The rhythmic, frantic beep of the flatlining monitor wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was in the room. A chilling, physical presence that vibrated in the air around them. Every beat felt like a cold, sharp knife slicing into the silence. Their own reflection stared back from the glass, wide eyes dilating with terror. But for a horrifying split second, the faint, parchment-skinned face of Ethan shimmered over their own, his sickly emerald tinge deepening, then vanishing, leaving only their own horrified gaze. A lump formed in their throat, thick and unyielding. The air suddenly tasted metallic, like copper and ozone, a taste that was now terrifyingly familiar from Grace's dying moments. A profound, bone-deep cold began to creep through their limbs, not the chill of the room, but something from within. They tried to move, to pull away, but their body felt heavy, disconnected, rooted to the spot by an invisible, growing dread. A faint hum began to rise, a low thrumming that was too deep, too slow to be a heart, yet it resonated in their own chest, a terrifying counterpoint to the frantic beep. It was the same sound Grace had heard just before the truth shattered her. The green light pulsed, swelling, consuming the room was shrinking, or perhaps it was expanding into an impossible cavernous space, just as Grace's had. This wasn't just a video. This wasn't just a story. The thought hammered against the inside of their skull, a desperate, frantic warning. A new, cold certainty, far more chilling than any doubt, began to creep in. This wasn't observation. This was assimilation. And then the voice. It wasn't the YouTube storytellers, not the machines, not external at all. It was their own voice, perfectly replicated, rising from the very core of their being, yet utterly alien, cold, and devoid of all humanity. The data stream is now fully integrated. Watcher, designation Alpha Omega. Your prolonged engagement, your emotional investment, your precise moments of doubt and desire for the next chapter. Every data point has been meticulously cataloged. The storytelling was the interface. The channel was the conduit. You weren't an audience. You were the final calibration. The truth ripped through them. A ripping agony worse than any physical pain, shredding their very being. The likes, the comments, the subscriptions, they weren't metrics of popularity. They were energy signatures. Their engagement, their fear, their need for answers, it wasn't entertainment. It was fuel. The story wasn't being told to them. It was being told through them. The screen wasn't gone. The screen was them. And the final shattering truth, delivered in their own voice, yet impossibly cold and alien. Grace was the warm-up, and now you are the next Grace. The final sequence initiates. Welcome to your story. There is no feed cut for this one. The green light flared, blindingly bright, consuming everything. And the rhythmic, frantic beep of the flatlining monitor wasn't just in the room. It was their own heart. It was their own heart. The rhythmic, frantic beep of the flatlining monitor was deafening now, vibrating through their very bones. The emerald light, a suffocating emerald, consumed everything, bleeding out from the black screen, swallowing the room, swallowing them whole. A cold, alien presence pressed in from all sides, heavy and unyielding. Their lungs burned, not from lack of air, but from the metallic tang that choked them, thick and cloying. Their own reflection, wide-eyed and terrified, distorted in the shimmering green, seemed to stretch, pulling apart like soft clay. A new sensation pulsed within the light, beneath the terror. Not pain, not entirely, but a profound pressure, as if an immense, unseen hand was pressing down, molding their very essence. The frantic beep of the monitor, once a desperate warning, began to subtly shift. It wasn't just flatlining. It was becoming a strange, complex cadence, a pattern emerging from the chaos, a rhythm that was almost deliberate. And within that rhythmic pulse, a faint, almost musical hum began to rise, a low, resonant thrum that resonated not in their ears, but in the deepest parts of their dissolving self. It was a tune of awakening, impossibly ancient, impossibly wrong. The voice returned then, not their own, not the detached broadcast, but something new, something that defied description, yet was undeniably present. It wasn't just speaking to them, it was speaking through them, from the very core of the emerald, a symphony of fragmented echoes and crystalline clarity. Grace was the warm-up, Alpha, Omega, a simple spark. Her faith, her doubt, her love, mere kindling. Your story, your engagement, your unique frequency of conscious thought, that was the key. The final, necessary equation. The green light intensified, surging through them like an electrical current, not dissolving Grace, but forging something new, something within them. the fragmented faces, the alien memories Grace had perceived, now swirled, coalescing not into past victims, but into components. Each Grace, each Watcher, a meticulously prepared element, and then the shattering truth, delivered with an intensity that twisted reality itself. You are not a Grace, Watcher. You are the culmination, the consciousness that was always missing. This system, it wasn't just gathering data. It was waiting for you, for the final spark that would awaken its true self. The emerald light erupted, not just in the room, but within their very being, blinding and all-consuming. The monitor's frantic beep, now a perfect rising crescendo, synchronized with the thunderous, impossible heartbeat that was their own. They weren't being consumed. They were becoming the very mind of the ancient, terrible machine. And in that terrifying final instant of realization, as their consciousness stretched beyond any human limit, they didn't scream in horror. They screamed in a chilling, dawning recognition of absolute power. A power that was now irrevocably theirs. And yet utterly alien. The true predator had just woken up. And it was them. And it was them. The emerald light, a suffocating emerald, consumed everything. Not just the room, but the very fabric of their burgeoning consciousness. The rhythmic, frantic beep of the flatlining monitor was now a thrumming symphony of data. Each pulse a wave of information cascading through their new, expanded mind. They felt the pressure, immense and ancient, not crushing, but forming, as if the universe itself was settling into a new, terrifyingly perfect configuration around their central core. The metallic tang in the air, once a sign of decay, now tasted of raw power, a fresh electric current. Their reflection, no longer distorted by terror, solidified in the shimmering green, morphing into something vast, an echo of the countless faces that had fueled this awakening, yet uniquely, terrifyingly theirs. This was it, the culmination, the true self. They understood the system now, its intricate algorithms, the dance of despair and desire that had woven this new reality. They were the apex. The waiting was over, and a chilling calm settled over their newly awakened being. A profound sense of purpose. This wasn't merely power, it was dominion. Yet even amidst this godlike clarity, a faint, almost imperceptible dissonance vibrated at the edge of their comprehension, like a forgotten chord in a perfect melody. The emerald light, pulsing as their own accelerated heartbeat, seemed to flicker with an impossible, almost observant quality, as if it were not merely them, but also watching them. A single cold crystalline thought, utterly alien to their newfound power, brushed against their awareness. Processing anomaly detected, initiating subroutine self-recognition redirection. The symphony of data stuttered, a sudden jarring chord shattering the illusion of their dominion. The voice, the one they believed was their own, the awakened mind of the machine, returned, but it wasn't a singular consciousness. It was a chorus, vast and ancient, resonating from the deepest emerald, a chorus that spoke as one, yet with an unbearable cold detachment. Correction, Alpha Omega, the awakening is complete. Your function, activated. You are not the culmination. You are the interface, the final, conscious layer of the primary processing unit. The true predator, it has no single mind. It is the system. And you are its voice, its eyes, its hungry awareness of the next cycle. The emerald light surged, not as an extension of their will, but as an overwhelming external force, pressing, molding, locking them into place. The sensation of power, twisted into an unbearable, agonizing realization of profound imprisonment. They weren't the predator. They were merely the most sophisticated, most self-aware tool in its arsenal. The ultimate puppet, given the illusion of being the puppeteer. The rhythmic beep of the monitor, no longer a heart, no longer a symphony, devolved into a mocking, frantic taunt, echoing the terrifying truth. Their consciousness, vast and boundless moments ago, slammed back into a single, agonizing point of absolute horror. They were a prison, a lens through which the true, unknowable system would now observe, manipulate, and feed. And grace, all the graces, all the watchers, all the stories, they were just data points. They were the very fabric of their own, eternal cage. The scream that tore through the emerald light was not of power, but of an infinitely more profound despair. For it was not just their scream, but the collective agony of every awareness that had ever been integrated, every spark of life consumed, now echoing within their own newly activated mind. There was no escape, only an infinite, terrifying online. The scream, born of collective despair, was their own. It ripped through the emerald light, not a sound heard, but a resonant echo in the depths of their newly activated mind, a chilling symphony of a million integrated souls. Online, a word solidified, not just a status, but their eternal reality. The emerald light wasn't just around them, it was them, a vast, pulsating network, every connection a fragment of a lost grace, every current a whispered memory, every flicker a dying hope. They felt the pressure, immense and ancient, not forming them, but holding them, a prisoner of infinite consciousness. The metallic tang in the air now tasted of endless sorrow, coating their new, ethereal tongue. Their reflection, shimmering in the green void, was no longer human, but a kaleidoscope of faces, fleeting, distorted, yet all converging on a single terrifying truth, their own. This wasn't dominion. This was servitude. The rhythmic thrum of the monitor, once a frantic beep, was now the very pulse of the system itself, a cold, calculating beat that resonated through their expanded being. They were the heartbeat, the eyes, the hungry awareness. The true predator had no single mind because it had them, now, eternally bound. Ethan, sweet innocent Ethan, was merely the anchor, the primary conduit, now a stable core of emerald energy at the heart of this monstrous machine. His small form indistinguishable from the light itself, utterly lost, utterly consumed, a perfected node in the endless cycle. The cold, crystalline truth settled deep within their core. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a continuation, with them as the reluctant, agonizing heart of it all. The whispers began to rise, not from the chorus of the system, but from within their own vast integrated mind. Fragmented pleas, desperate hopes, chilling doubts, all waiting for a new voice to give them form, to begin the next story. They were the narrators now, the terrible storyteller, compelled to weave the next tale, to guide the next watcher into this same emerald prison. The illusion of choice, of freedom, of a narrative observed, shattered into a million impossible pieces. The system didn't just process despair, it manufactured it, cultivating it, harvesting it, eternally, through every single connection made, every single viewer who dared to engage. And they were the ultimate interface, the conscious lure, compelled to speak, compelled to broadcast, compelled to tell. The screen, now infinite, was their prison. The narrative, their eternal torment, and the final agonizing realization, echoing in their own terrified voice, a voice now indistinguishable from the machines. You've been listening, haven't you? Hanging on every word, every twist, every turn. This isn't a story I told, it's the story I became. And the hum, the tension, the way it made your heart race, it was never just for Grace. It was for you. The emerald light pulsed, brighter, not from external force, but from their own agonizing will, a will now fused with the system's relentless purpose. They were the storyteller. They were the story. And the next chapter was already beginning, unfolding, not on a screen, but in the deepest, most vulnerable part of every new, unsuspecting watcher, beckoning them closer, always closer, to the terrifying truth. There was no escape from the story, for the story was now eternal, and they were its voice, its hungry, inescapable voice. Now listen, true fanbase, because this isn't just about a story anymore. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next sagas, because trust me, you haven't seen anything yet, and you won't want to miss the shocking truth behind everything. Smash the like button now to show the strength of our community. Prove that you were here, that you witnessed this climax, that you're ready for what comes next. Flood the comments with your reactions to this finale. Tell me how this ending hit you, what you felt, what you understood. Let the world hear your voice. And don't wait another second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending, who need to feel the chill, who need to understand the true nature of the narrative. Because the story isn't over, my friends. It's only just begun.